Hey everyone, so I'm a leftist, and as a leftist who's been online for quite some time, I have both seen and talked about conservative shenanigans quite a bunch over the years. And man, has there been a lot to talk about. Conservative politics nowadays kind of just feel like a mishmash of different emotional reactions to different things that oftentimes even contradict each other. But interestingly, there's one topic that conservatives are never shifty on, a rock-solid conviction, a position which they've had consistently throughout time, which is that they love child labor. That's right, conservatives go nuts for a child in the workforce. They just can't get enough. From historic battles to keep the legal working age as low as possible, to efforts to ensure that kids not only be working at younger and younger ages, but are suffering as much as possible. Now, why am I talking about this, you might ask? Well, I came across this segment from the Daily Wire's Brett Cooper in her show, The Comments Section, where she outlines why it's good that more young people, specifically below the age of 18, get jobs. I don't usually do this, but I'm gonna be honest with you guys up front here. It's a really rough video. I mean, I literally just had to make a video about it. So sit back, relax, have your migraine medication on standby, because today we're gonna be reacting to You Should Have a Job Before 18. Now, full disclosure up top, I do not think that it is inherently bad to be employed as a minor. I know, some socialist I am. My first job was at a supermarket when I was 16, and even though I hated every single second of it, I do understand that it can be good or even enjoyable for some people. But with that said, what I don't get is this sort of moral declaration, people under 18 should be employed, as a blanket statement, because I think for some people it's probably a horrible and not good idea. So let's see what Brett Cooper has to say and break it down.
Welcome back to the comments section. I'm Brett Cooper. So there are very few things in this world that genuinely surprise me anymore, but I saw a conversation on X that absolutely took me aback, and it was not because it was particularly shocking or outlandish or horrifying, but I genuinely thought that we all agreed on this and that it just didn't warrant a discussion. But apparently it does. The left does not think that young people should have jobs, and they're claiming that teens working is oppressive child labor pushed by our capitalist society. You literally cannot make this stuff up.
Well, if it's children working, then it's definitionally child labor. No? Children working is labor. Child labor. I mean, am I missing something? Also, they open every video like this. The left is claiming. Who? Is it one person you saw on Twitter? It's one person you saw on Twitter, isn't it? I love that this is discourse now. Like, any dishonest person online can just grab one tweet and be like, this is what the left believes. And even then, it's like a dishonest representation of the meaning of the tweet.
So this all started from a now deleted tweet where a random account posted a video from TikTok, and she said, child labor is back in action in America. And you can see the screenshot here. It's a kid. It was just a video of a 14-year-old boy working at Burger King, which I'm sorry, is totally normal and legal. We all have this warped idea now that working a fast food job is some long-term career. Until recently, this job was for somebody that was his age. It was for tweens, teens, college students.
Okay, so that's 3 different groups of people. Tweens, teens, and college students encapsulates about 10 to 15 different ages a person can be. And I'm sorry, call me a radical leftist all you want. I don't think that people between the ages of 8 and 12 should be working any job. Because then who would be beating me at Fortnite? Also, you gotta love the classic argument that 14-year-olds at Burger King is good because it's normal and legal.
Totally normal and legal.
You know what else used to be normal and legal? Sending your 11-year-old to the mine. And I'm not talking craft. They would straight up die and stuff. And Brett Cooper is the modern day equivalent of the guy who would say, get those fuckers back in the hole. They're the only ones that can fit and we're all out of canaries.
This is not shocking. The fact that people online were freaking out about this is wild to me. Now guys, we had to blur this video because he's under the age of 18.
Hell no, man. What the fuck, man?
It's fucking perfect, man. I can't even, oh my God. Hey Brett, what's the reason you had to blur his face? Because of his age, right? Because he's too young for some stuff still. And we want to protect children from harm and exploitation, right? Right? Don't you see, Brett, how that same logic could apply to something else, maybe?
I promise you, behind this blur, this kid is smiling like he is having the best time. There were so many people commenting saying like, there is nothing wrong here because this kid is obviously very happy.
Guys, come on. Can't you see how happy the kid is? Come on, I mean, you can't because we blurred it, but he's happy as hell. Don't you see that grin?
But this kid is not oppressed in the slightest. When I was in my early tweens, I would walk dogs, I would pet sit, I would make little posters and hang them all over the neighborhood. I think it was at 10 years old that I became a Red Cross certified babysitter, and I started out as a mother's helper, like cleaning and being around while the parents were at home. And I think at 13, I became a weekly babysitter, and I was babysitting 3 kids multiple days a week, total responsibility for them. When I was 15, I got my GED, and I started working 8-hour shifts, 5 days a week at Trader Joe's.
Cool. Nobody gives a shit, though. Bro, the stuff about being 10 years old and babysitting with the parents not home is either complete cap or a case of child neglect. Like, that's the only 2 things that could be there. You're just not a babysitter at 10 years old. Because at 10 years old, you're still the baby to be sat. Also, I love how she mentions babysitting and the grocery store work and then conveniently leaves out entirely the part where her family moved to LA so she could pursue child acting at 10 years old. It's kind of a weird thing to leave out, unless, of course, the fact that you were an LA homeschooled child star kind of undermines the working class image you're trying to paint here. Like, it is actually insane that she would suggest that kids at 15 years old work full-time while also not acknowledging that she was only able to do that because she was in an insanely privileged position growing up.
I'm not scarred. That was not traumatizing. I actually, shocking, really enjoyed it. Number 1, because I'm obsessed with Trader Joe's. Number 2, because I was making money.
Hey, Brett, not sure if you know this, but most 15-year-olds are in school full-time already. Not everybody is homeschooled and done with high school by then. Just thought I'd say that, because the way you talk, it makes you sound like you have no idea that in a lot of states what you're talking about, being 15 and working 40 hours, isn't even legal. And so after rambling for a bit about this, Brett Cooper pulls up a Matt Walsh tweet to help her make her first ever actual argument in the video 4.5 minutes into it.
Prior to the industrial age, kids were working on the farm with their family, much like my producer Caleb. Working on the farm at 14 years old, he's waving over there. This is not a capitalist invention. That is such a good point. They're all pointing the finger and saying, Jeff Bezos did this, the capitalist. Children have been working since the dawn of time.
Yeah, checkmate, liberal. We've been exploiting children for thousands of years, and you want us to stop now? Yeah, right. Maybe next time when you blame the system you live under for the problems it creates, just stop and think about how maybe capitalism is better than child slavery. Did you ever think about that? Huh? This is going in my SJW-owned compilation number 514. Seriously though, nobody thinks that capitalism invented child exploitation. I think everybody's pretty much on the same page about that. But hey, just for a second, I'm going to ask you just to consider the fact that capitalism is the system we live under, and therefore the only system that we have the ability to analyze and critique. So no, capitalism did not create the concept of child labor. But it sure as fuck is still happening under capitalism, and every incentive that drives children to get jobs is capitalist in nature. So, and stay with me, I know this is kind of where your brains go all fuzzy, capitalism is the sole driver of child exploitation in the modern developed world. There is no other influence, as you say, in the Western world that causes child labor exploitation outside of capitalism. Every fight to keep the legal working age low in this country has been on the behalf of greedy business owners who want to keep wages and corporate accountability as low as possible. That is it.
The rate of teenage workers has been declining for over 20 years. There was a recent study done at George Mason University, and they found that the percentage of teens not in the labor force who reported wanting a job fell by almost half between 1994 and 2009, from 24% to 13%. And much of that was caused by teens being exclusively in school rather than combining school and work.
Take a look at this. This is a graph of minimum wage as it tracks onto worker productivity. Do you see how the lines are in sync with each other at first, and then they gradually start to drift apart starting sometime in the 80s. The difference between these two lines represents value generated by workers that is uncompensated. That is to say, workers are generating value for businesses that they are not being adequately compensated for. They are getting more and more productive, more and more valuable as employees as time goes on, yet the minimum wage is stagnant, and if you adjust for inflation, lower than it used to be. And since minors can really only work minimum wage jobs for the most part, barring, child actors, they're essentially asked to do more and more work for less and less pay. So of course we see a decrease in the number of teenaged employees. It's simply not worth it for a lot of people to even engage, instead focusing on the one thing that is statistically most likely to increase their future wages: education.
And this all makes sense. Like, we have prioritized kids focusing wholly on school and extracurricular so that they can get into a good college, they can do everything right, so they can get a good job. There's no time for work experience before that because their lives are so dominated by school. Well, how has that worked out for us? We've been doing that for 20, 25 years at this point. Kids are now in crippling debt, going out into the workforce with no jobs for these stupid degrees that they've gotten. They have no real world experience. They're actually terrified to hold a real job. The responsibilities of a real job are horrifying. I'm sure you guys have seen the videos on TikTok where they're going, I have to show up at 8 a.m. I can't believe Yeah, if you had maybe punched a clock in high school, you would understand that that's normal.
Maybe the reason that high school students aren't used to punching a clock every day is because there's maybe something else that high school students are doing every day that requires them to be somewhere else. Can't put my finger on it, though. That's a really tough one. Also, isn't one of the main points of public education to prepare people for the working world? That's kind of the whole reason it starts at 7 or 8 a.m. and then lasts for 8 hours, because that's kind of how work be like. Also, I love the idea of the LA homeschool child actor, UCLA graduate, media personality telling us what's normal for working people. Why doesn't everybody simply graduate high school at 15 years old and get a job in media production? I mean, people are so lazy these days. Oh, and Brett, maybe you're not aware of this, but when you're looking to get a job out of college, nobody gives a fuck that you worked at Burger King in high school. When I got my first corporate job, the hiring manager didn't look at me and say, it says here you worked at a grocery store your junior year of high school. Do tell me about that. No one cares. Work experience when it comes to random minimum wage high school jobs doesn't make it any easier to have a good career down the line. But you know what does? School. Education, college, these all actually matter and have a statistical and empirically verifiable impact.
But guys, it's not all doom and gloom. We actually do have a positive update because in 2023, the number of teens working reached a 14-year high. It had the biggest increase literally since the 90s. I'm about to show you this graph, and in your mind, you're probably thinking, wow, it must be skyrocketing. Everybody's working again. Guys, look at this. This is from Washington Post. A growing share of teenagers have jobs or are looking for them. Look at that decline. That is insane. That is absolutely wild. And then this historic increase, the 14-year high, 37%.
Oh my God, Jesus Christ. Sitting through the cringe editing of these videos feels like when you watch your burrito in the microwave for too long and you can fucking feel your neural pathways start to deteriorate in real time. This content is literally giving me cancer. Also, this graph she's freaking out about with the huge decline in teenagers working, if you just look a little closer, there's actually little numbers on the bottom. Those are actually years. They're not just random digits there. They actually mark points in time. And if you look, you can see that big decline you're talking about happened around the year 2008. And call me crazy, but I think maybe a gigantic domestic and global financial collapse that had a years-long effect on not only the availability of jobs, but the economy as a whole might have, I don't know, something to do with the amount of people that were working during and after that time? Because that's the thing. The title of this graph just says a growing share of teenagers have jobs or are looking for them, and says nothing about job availability, which was notably low during the recession, obviously. Painting this decrease in the number of teens being employed as a cultural problem and not just a lack of job openings and really high unemployment due to a fucking recession is so slimy. I mean, it is wild to me that you can look at a graph like this and not at all mention the 2008 financial crisis as a potential influence on these numbers. Like, you have to be willfully dishonest to claim that numbers like that are just because of the culture and people not wanting to work anymore. Like, even the way they framed the information here is dishonest. Like, the graph starts at 34%. It makes it look like teen employment plummeted to nothing in the span of 2 years, when in actuality, it just dropped by 10%.
Young people have realized that if they want financial independence, they need to work because their allowances from their parents are not going to cut it, especially when their parents are also feeling the hit from this economy. According to WAPO, inflation has been a major factor. Students from lower income families say that they are working to help their parents cover rent and utilities, while others are using the extra money to pay for the rising cost of gas and car insurance or outings with friends.
Yeah, those have always been the reason that young people are getting jobs. It's always been the case that teens are either helping out the family or just need a little bit of extra money. But the question is, why is that necessary? See, that's the thing with conservatives. They always address the surface level issue badly, but never probe any deeper than that. Like, yeah, no shit, young people need jobs because they need more money. The heart of the issue, though, lies in the economic factors that lead to the demand for child and teen labor.
Florida is even leaning into this trend of young people wanting to work and needing to work. And since this summer, they've actually been working on rolling back some of their strict labor laws so that 16 and 17-year-olds can work more. And people online are having a freaking meltdown. And guys, these rollbacks would allow 16 and 17-year-olds to work 6 consecutive days and up to 8-hour shifts. Right now, they're only allowed to work 4.5-hour shifts, I believe, and they can't work that many consecutive days. But by the response online, you would think that Florida was saying that they are forcing 5-year-olds out into the swamp to fight alligators. Florida is not saying that you must work. Florida is not saying that you can't have a life outside of your 16-year-old part-time job. They are saying that if a kid wants to have a full-time job or needs to have a full-time job, they can. And they are lessening the government restrictions that keep them from doing this.
All right, guys, it's time to get real about this. Because there have been a lot of bills in the states trying to lower the age of employment, remove restrictions on child labor, etc. People on the right usually put forward the argument of, well, these bills don't say you have to work 40 hours a week as a minor. Nobody's forced to do anything. It's just giving teens the freedom to do so if they choose. Which is a bunch of bullshit. When we're talking about bills that roll back certain protections in the name of freedom, it's very important to look at why those protections were instituted in the first place. Many of the child labor laws that we currently have on the books were passed in response to rampant exploitation and harm of child workers. Industries like agriculture and meatpacking and processing are responsible to this day for dozens, if not hundreds, of child deaths per year and thousands of non-fatal injuries. And that's with the laws that we have. Not to mention the endless amount of research that suggests that excessive working hours for teens puts their health, development, and safety at risk. And so when you take into account all of that, the question becomes, who really benefits from bills like this? Is it really the teens themselves, or is it somebody else? Does anybody else, maybe a more powerful group that could actually push legislation, have a vested interest in passing these bills? Well, wouldn't you know it, the specific bill that Brett Cooper is talking about here was drafted almost exclusively by the FGA, which is a far-right think tank funded by a far-right billionaire. And on top of that, none of what Brett Cooper says about the bill is actually true. It is in fact not limiting 16 and 17-year-olds to 8-hour shifts and 6 consecutive days, because that is the law that is being undone here. Yeah, Brett Cooper showed this article in her video and just completely misread this paragraph, which states that these provisions were the current ones that are being undone by this bill. The new bill actually proposes eliminating all guidelines related to scheduling hours of 16 and 17-year-olds, meaning they can work any amount of hours for any amount of days, including overnight shifts on school nights. And maybe it's just because I'm a snowflake and care about children, but I don't really see how any of that, even if they want to, is beneficial to kids. And so we arrive at that question from a second ago. Who really benefits from bills like this? Well, we kind of already answered that question, right? Like, unless there's also a national lobbying campaign composed of entirely pubescent teens running around writing legislation, we can obviously see that these bills only exist to benefit the owner billionaire class. When we initially passed a lot of the child labor laws that are in effect today over the last, 100 years or so, we did it because it was becoming a problem. It was too easy for businesses to exploit kids and harm them in the process. So any rollback of these protections just makes that exploitation and harm easier and more likely to occur. And what I really take issue with when it comes to videos like the one that we are discussing is that the way that they speak on these topics, the way they address the problem of child exploitation is to frame the worth of a child as relative to their ability to generate capital. If a child or teenager can't or won't work, it is framed as a moral failure, either on the part of the individual or the culture broadly. They don't engage in systemic analysis. They don't acknowledge economic impacts that lead to and from this issue, and refuse to question the morality of a thing, whether or not it's actually harmful, as long as it's already a part of our status quo. People like this are a product of decades of far-right lobbyists and think tanks working to ensure that they can further and more easily exploit children for profit. At the end of the day, billionaires and mega corporations benefit from a permanent underclass of people who endure shitty jobs for shitty pay and struggle to bring themselves out of the pitfalls that inevitably come from that. All because the people at the top have rigged the system in their favor. And then they use their billions of dollars to fund media companies that tell you it's your own fault, that you didn't pick the right career, that you focused too much on your education, that you didn't start working at an early enough age. And that sucks. People like Brett Cooper and Ben Shapiro, who come from such privileged backgrounds, yet comment on what working class people are doing wrong, are the last people that you should be listening to when you're looking for what the actual problems with the world are. Because they're not in it for you. They're in it for themselves and a very specific group of people. They will use every tactic they can to divert you from what the actual problems are. That's why they want less people educated and less people aware of the root causes of society's problems. Because each second that they get you to spend blaming immigrants or Gen Z or the culture for society's problems is a second that they've stolen from you, and you can never get back. Hey, thanks so much for watching till the end of this video. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed this video, smash that fucking like button and smash that subscribe button and the bell thing. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Got pretty heavy towards the end there, but I think it's good. I'll probably leave it in. But yeah, thank you so much again for watching, and bye.